Hello everybody, my name is Ryan with Alder Branch Homestead, and we're back to finish our card wallet. It's a really fun, easy project. If you missed the first couple episodes in the part 0 of the series, we made the pattern. If you want to skip that, you can get the pattern in the description of this video. In our last video, I showed you how to dye and cut your leather, and in this video, we're going to finish up the wallet. So, as I said, the pattern's in the description, or you can watch the first video in the series. Then, if you want to find any of the tools or anything that I use in this video, you can find those in the description of this video. There are Amazon affiliate links, so if you use the links, I might get a commission, helps the channel, helps me make more videos like this, and all that good stuff. And without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, let's bevel and slick the top edges of our pockets, because we won't be able to get to them after we sew it all up. Make sure to only do one edge right now. We're just going to wait a couple minutes for that edge dye to dry. Now we're just going to give this a light buff with some canvas. And go over the edge with some Tokonole. And slick it up. Now, just need to mark the glue areas just on one side for now. Get that out of the way. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to mark just below where our pocket falls on both sides. And then we will just mark this out like that. And I have this marked at, or gauged, at my stitching inset, which is going to be 5 millimeters. This is essentially just a regular divider. Another cool trick is if you're going to use the same inset as your stitching spacing, you can actually just use your stitching chisel. Because of the thickness of everything, it tends to be a little bit short, but hey, it's all good. Mark our pocket as well. Remember to mark down from the edge that you just slicked, because obviously we want this to be the top side. Then rough it up. This is especially important if you use Tokonole on the flesh side of your leather, because that's effectively sealed it up and it won't bond as well with the Tokonole in the way. And make sure you marked on the flesh side of the back of your wallet and the flesh side of your pocket. If you don't have one of these, you can just use the end of your dividers, hobby knife, and assuming you haven't glued the top of your glue shut, this is Aqualim 315, just want to apply some glue to the spots that you just marked. Now, we'll just let that dry for a couple minutes. Side note, if you're going to do a really big radius, you're going to use like a 1-inch washer to do the corners of your stitches, you may actually want to rough and glue just a little bit more of the corner there. Not a ton, just a little bit. Glue is dry, tacky. Now we're just going to line this up. This water-based stuff is pretty forgiving. You need to pull it off and readjust. Though, of course, once you press it down like this, you are it's together. And now we want to cut this to length. If you're using the digital pattern, you can just do the other pocket and start marching along. But if you want a perfect fit, or if you made your own pattern and you don't know how long it needed to be because it's a little bit hard to predict with the thickness of the leather and everything, you can't quite template that out perfectly with just paper, we're just going to stack up our card. Make sure it's not right at the bottom because obviously there's going to be stitches there. And sandwich this all together. It doesn't have to be perfect. In the end, it is leather, so it will stretch a little bit, or worst case scenario, you can just wet form it a little bit. And we're just going to hold that all together. Let's double check we're all good. That looks good. I can kind of peek in there to see the card in there. Also, keep in mind that's actually 2 cards taped together, because obviously there's going to be a card in each pocket. We're going to fold that over. And look, that's what we need for our wallet. So I'm just going to mark that right there. Doesn't need to be perfect because that's going to be the bottom of the pocket. And in fact, if we want to be on the extra safe side, we can actually cut it just a little bit past that. Get a square line right there. We'll give ourselves just a little bit of margin for error. Also, just don't cut straight along that line. You probably were at least a little bit crooked there, so we'll just go just past that, and then... So now, it's just rinse and repeat what we did for this pocket, for this pocket. Now let's put the radius on our corners. So we can just line up one of these guys like that. It's got a bunch of different radiuses on it, or you could use a washer or whatever you want. Like I said before, if you use a really big radius like that, you want to make sure that you actually glued that far in. And if you made your own pattern, you want to make sure that you actually left enough space because that'll start pushing the card back up that way. Turn this around. And when you're cutting this, it doesn't need to be perfect because we will smooth out all the lumps and bumps in just a second. And now we'll just use some 80 grit sandpaper to smooth everything out. If your glue job wasn't perfect, you can line up your edges. All looking good. One other alternative, if you don't have something round like that, you can literally just nick the corner off and sand that, and you'll get a nice tight radius there. Now we're just going to mark all of our stitching. So we're going to start with the inset. I've got my calipers divider set to 5 millimeters. Now, if you're on a flimsy table like I am, helps to have some sort of an anvil and then a mat so you can do your punching. If you use a self-healing mat, you are just going to punch holes straight through it. Now I'm just going to set a single hole through each corner, and if you're using diamond punches like this for stitching, you want to make sure that your hole is going diagonal across the corner like that. So do your best to try to get it just in that corner. And the other trick is to make sure it's perfectly perpendicular. I like to take a double punch and just get that first hole on either side. Now with our 4-hole punch, we're just going to go along. And before you get within about 2 holes of that next corner, we're going to stop. So now when we get to our corner, if we look at our punch, we're going to be just short. So we'll end up with 2 punches right in a row. And we don't want that. So the solution is just to tweak the spacing so that it is just longer. So if you have 5mm irons, you want to just make it just a hair over 5, because we were really close there. If you're completely off, you make your adjustments. There's also a fancy tool to do this, but you can get away with just a simple divider. From both sides there, and mark our hole. Punch a single hole there, and a single hole there. And now it's just rinse and repeat all the way around, and you can hardly tell. Now it's time to get this stitched up, and the question is, what color thread do we want? Given the time of year, let's go with orange. If you've never saddle stitched before, we now need to figure out how much thread we need. And the answer is, it depends. But a good rule of thumb is that you want to do 3 to 4 times the stitch row length of your project in thread. And I would highly recommend erring on the side of more, because any money you save on thread, a couple cents, you are going to completely waste on time if you have to rip it out and do it again. And I'll also tell you that the smaller the project, the more thread you need, relatively, because you need some buffer thread just for your needles. So I'm actually going to be doing 4 times the length of this to make sure that I have plenty. If you go with even thicker leather, you're going to want even more thread, because obviously you're passing through more. And so that is our single length, our double length, triple length, our 4th length, and why not just a little extra for good luck. Especially if it's your first time stitching something like this, having a little bit more thread is definitely more than less. Thread or needles, we're just going to cut our thread at an angle like this. The sharper the better, but don't go too crazy. And you'll thread your needle and then just stab the needle through to lock our thread in. You also don't need jumbo scissors. You can use some small fly tying scissors. Those work great too. So I've got my wallet in a makeshift stitching pony. This is not necessary at all, but it's a little easier for me to show the process of stitching this like this. And if you've never done a saddle stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to be crisscrossing through each of the holes. So each hole will get the needles crisscrossing both through, and we'll just work our way around. So pick a place to start. I like to start somewhere in the middle of a straight run, hopefully where it's not too visible, because we will need to end our stitching there. And we're going to pass our first needle all the way through. And pull the thread so it is just about even. Obviously this thread's really long so you can't see it, but we've got even amounts on each side. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our right needle and pass it through the leather there. Pull it all the way through, so now we are loose here. And it's a little hard to see, especially when you're first taking your first stitch and you have all this extra thread. But we want this hanging thread, the first needle that we pulled through, to be hanging under the thread that we're about to just thread through this way. So now we're going to hold this back, because we don't want to stab that thread that we just put through that stitch hole. We're going to pass that needle through. And now, without looping up everything on our desk, we are going to gently but firmly pull that tight. Now you want this snug, but you don't need to trust your grip strength and see how hard you can pull on that. That's completely unnecessary and can actually give you trouble depending on how hard you yank on that and how thick your leather is. So again, right needle through, hang it down, left needle goes in front of that thread and on top of the thread that we just put through. Now we pull everything snug. And there you have it. So I'm going to stitch this all up because this isn't very fun to stitch like this. But I'll be right back and I will show you how to end your stitch run. All right, now that we're at the end, all we want to do is we're going to flip our wallet around and we're going to start stitching back the way that we came. And we're just going to take about 1.5 stitches. And you also got to be really careful now that we're stitching where there already are stitches. Make sure on the back side that you're not stabbing through the thread of the stitches you already made. 1 stitch. And what's a half stitch? We're just going to take this one, which in my case is the left, but whichever side you want your ends on, which for me is the inside of the wallet. Now all we have to do is hide these ends. So I'm just going to cut this. You want to cut it short, but so there's at least a little bit of a tag end hanging out there. You want a Bic lighter or something like this clipper lighter or something like that. Zippos don't work well, but anything with a nice soft flame where you can get right up to the base of the flame. And you're just going to melt that thread. And it is hot, so you can actually just use the metal on the lighter, but just give that a quick poke and it'll smush right into the rest of the thread. And if you didn't know where that was, do you see where that was? You can't hardly see it, can you? So now we've hidden our edge, we've finished it. That thread is never coming out. And there we go. Stitching's all done. We've got a nice contrast with the orange and the black. So now we're just going to give one more once over of the edges just to make sure everything is nice and flush. That one could be a little bit more flush right there. So anywhere where there's a little bit of an overhang or anything weird, just give that a sand down until you're flush and smooth. Now we just need to bevel our edges. Burnish the edges a little bit with some canvas. Dye the edges with our edge dye marker. Double check you didn't miss anything. Let that dry for a minute. Another once over with the canvas. And now a layer of Tokonole. Slick the edges. Now for the top coat. Just going to use some Fiebing's Leather Balm. Break in those pockets just a hair. And there we are. As that breaks in your pocket, that'll sit flat just a day or two. And I bet you, if we wanted to, we could even get another couple cards in there. A little bit more of a stretch, but like I said, that'll break in. And there we have our card wallet. And it fit not 2, but 4 cards. And there we have it. Very own wallet we made with our own 2 hands. Hope you liked this video. Hope it was fun. As you can see, we got some nice Halloween colors on that one. And this is another one I made just for fun out of my chrome tan leather that I showed in the last video. So, if you have any questions, put those in the comments. Keep an eye out for the next video where I'm going to show you how to add some extra pockets, a whole bunch of quick, easy modifications to take your wallet to the next level. So, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.